The band is back together. We got so much to touch on from the last just few days, let alone the last couple weeks while I was gone. We'll break it all down on tonight's episode of Locked On Sooner.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Sooner Nation. Welcome to Locked On Sooners Live. Thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. For your second listen, make sure you go check out one of the other great Locked On podcasts across the network, Locked On Thunder, Locked On Mavs, for all your NBA Summer League action. My name is John Williams. I'm back. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. This is Josh Helmer, my buddy here, who's been holding it down for the nearly 2 weeks I've been gone. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref in Norman. And Josh, let's start with what's been going down most recently over the last couple of days. A flurry of predictions have come in favoring the Oklahoma Sooners for several prospects. Let's just start with the big dog up top, the guy that is now the number one prospect in the On 300 rankings. That is Williams Nwaneri. This recruiting prediction comes from an Indiana insider. Okay. Now, when it's Georgia and Oklahoma recruiting analysts going back and forth with predictions and reporting on who's in the lead, who's the favorite, okay, it means something. But then when you get this random kind of snowball lofted from up in the Hoosier State talking about where Williams Nwaneri is going to land, it makes you take notice, Josh.
Sure it does. And I think I've said this on a couple of the recruitments actually while you were out and about, or, the last couple of shows when you were here. We've said it before. We'll say it again. When it's not an Oklahoma insider, look, again, you put a lot of stock into what Colin Kennedy says. You put a lot of stock into what Parker Thune says. You put a lot of stock into what Brandon Drum and Josh McCuistion say. And those are going to be probably always the first antennas that go off. But then all of a sudden, when you've got an Indiana reporter and you've got a Texas reporter and you've got a Clemson reporter, and I'm just spouting off different names. These don't even necessarily apply, but the Indiana one does. But you catch my drift. When it starts coming from other places that aren't on and directly located within the Oklahoma beat, yeah, that's a pretty telltale sign typically in recruitments.
Yeah, and I had a person ask this question on the Locked On Sooners Twitter account. So the latest prediction comes from Rivals Alec Busey. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. That covers Indiana recruiting for Rivals. And somebody on Twitter asked me this question as I was managing the Locked On Sooners Twitter account. Go follow it if you don't. What would he know? And my question and really my response was, a lot of times these guys, they cover recruiting for a particular region. We talk with Brian Smith here on the Locked On Network. He's very in tune with what goes on down in the Southeast. That's where he's based. That's where he's located. That's his ball game. He knows what's going on down there. The same could be said for a guy like Alec Busey, who is located in the upper Midwest in Indiana, probably has some pretty good relationships with what's going on in the Midwest, if not with Williams Nwaneri himself, at least with the coaching staff, a lot of guys that are at least close to him. So he's got reason to probably have some inside information, or at least some intuition as to how this is going. And it's a guy that's probably going to be in, similar, discussions for a lot of the guys that would be ended up at Notre Dame or Michigan, things like that. Just because it's going to be Oklahoma, it doesn't change that maybe Alec Busey has a little bit of insider information, because again, Kansas City, Missouri, that's a Midwest state that Alec probably has at least a lot of ties to. So yeah, an Indiana insider, it's not Oklahoma, it's not Georgia. Now, when that Georgia recruiting prediction comes in, because one of my guys over at Sooners Wire made this point: of all the Georgia buzz, we've not seen a crystal ball from Georgia writers, a Rivals Future cast, an On3 prediction from a Georgia, writer. So you can say what you want about all the Georgia buzz, but they've yet to drop those predictions in. So they're not feeling 100% confident yet that Nwaneri's ended up a Bulldog. So it is telling when an Indiana insider has something to say in the recruitment, because these guys don't often, and we'll talk about another one, here in a second with one of the wide receiver targets Oklahoma's after. These guys aren't just throwing predictions out willy-nilly. I know a lot of times it can seem that way and we might think it's that, but no, these guys, they want to maintain a reputation that shows that, hey, yes, we know what we're talking about. We're not just throwing predictions up against the wall and hoping they stick. So Alec Busey from Indiana Rivals sharing a prediction for Nwaneri, I think that is a telltale sign that Oklahoma is still very much the favorite for Williams Nwaneri.
Well, I mean, I think you nailed it with a lot of that probably connected to folks across the Rivals network, or whether that's a regional recruiting director, somebody that is connected to the Kansas City metro area, or just, even beyond that in just sort of the northern region of the United States, or if just the individual himself is connected to the KC metro area with a lot of these recruits that they keep up with, or coaches in that area. So, yeah, I mean, look, could it be something that you're connected with a Parker Thune or Brandon Drum too? Yeah, but even that's, pretty telling if the argument's that convincing from somebody that you're ready to go ahead and attach your name to it in the form of a Rivals future cast. So in everything that we keep hearing, John, is that, yeah, there's legitimate momentum in terms of Oklahoma here for Williams Nwaneri. And who was it? Wilt Fong or somebody put out there today that I think it was Wilt Fong that thought initially that Georgia had made a really strong impression on Williams Nwaneri for the June visit, but that really it didn't last as long as maybe he was expecting, or didn't have that lasting impact the way that he was expecting, and basically thinks it's Oklahoma and Missouri right now for Williams Nwaneri. And I got to tell you, obviously you worry about the home field advantage in a recruitment, but I like Oklahoma's chances if it's Oklahoma, Missouri in a recruiting battle, John.
It seems like it's been Oklahoma for quite some time. The Georgia buzz, a lot of that just came out of his official visit, and then that impromptu visit where he was down in Atlanta and they said, hey, come on by, just come by Athens and check it out, for another unofficial. A lot of times that buzz comes when a guy comes to town. And again, I talk to my guys all the time, and I've said it on Twitter, like, find me the prospect that's going to say something negative about a visit. You very rarely see that, right? You very rarely hear a prospect talk down about an official visit, unofficial visit, about a coaching staff. One, that's just good business sense. You don't want to talk bad about a potential, future employer, quote unquote employer. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why there was so much buzz coming out of Georgia, because I'm sure he did enjoy his time. I'm sure he did, have a good visit with Kirby Smart and get an understanding of how they're going to utilize him. But for months, not just for a brief moment in this recruitment, but for months, it's been Oklahoma that has been out in the lead for one of the best prospects, and according to On3, the very best prospect in the 2024 recruiting cycle. So I think all of that is very telling. Yeah, I mean, Missouri is going to have a puncher's chance in this always, because the close to home thing is a factor. According to the guys that are in the know, the Parker Thunes, the Brandon Drums, they, being close to home, being close to Lee Summit North, that matters to Williams Nwaneri and his family. Oklahoma's not that far. I mean, Missouri is not that far. So that's going to be a part of it. At the same time, again, Oklahoma's been out in front of this. Now they just got to not trip up in the final 100 meters of the stretch, as it looks like, according to Wilt Fong's story earlier today, he's going to commit on August 1st. Whether that holds up or not, or he pushes that back out to signing day, we'll see. But it's huge that Oklahoma, is continuing to get predictions for Williams Nwaneri, and seemingly, according to Wilt Fong, still way out in front of Georgia. If you're out in front of Georgia for any defensive commit or any defensive prospect, that matters. Who's done it better than Georgia defensively over the last few years? Nobody. And so if you're able to win out on a defensive recruiting battle, man, that's huge for Brent Venables, for Miguel Chavis, for Todd Bates, for Ted Roof, for all those guys, man, that's a big, big win for them. We got more recruiting predictions to discuss and dissect here after I talk to you all about our friends over at Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs, man, incredibly comfortable shorts. I've just been on a 13-day road trip with the family, 2,997 miles, driving through the Southwest, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, Las Vegas, Nevada, spending time in some 110, 114 degree heat. What was I wearing? My Bird Dogs, man. They were so comfortable in the drive, comfortable poolside, comfortable, rolling around Santa Fe, rolling around Flagstaff, Las Vegas. It didn't matter, man. Completely comfortable. They have this great wicking material that keeps you cool, keeps you dry, and keeps you looking good and looking fit at the same time. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Make sure you get that free Yeti style tumbler from our friends over at Bird Dog. But man, some great, great clothes over there as well. birddogs.com/lockedoncollege today. Other recruiting predictions, Josh. Let's talk the next one, the one that's probably the most, or the next commitment that could happen on this front as far as commitment dates are concerned. Although I think Casey Poe might be committing before Taylor Tatum, but maybe Taylor Tatum is maybe the next Oklahoma Sooner. Number one running back, the now 5-star running back in the 247 Sports composite, received a couple predictions over the last couple of days. One from, I can't remember who it was now, but a Josh. Oh, I'm so out of sorts, guys. This is my first time recording in several weeks. Josh.
Wait for it.
Yeah, wait for it. He's not Josh Helmer. He's Josh Newberg, a On3 national host. And then another one from a Texas insider. Again, we talk about anytime it's outside of the recruiting battle, it matters. This one's coming from a Texas insider, Josh Wells. So all the Josh is getting in on Taylor Tatum. Huge, man. Taylor Tatum commits on the 21st, but two more predictions that favor the Sooners. I know the USC fans are going to be in the mentions later on down the road talking about why would anybody want to go to Oklahoma, and it's going to be USC. But all these predictions that continue to pump out in favor of Oklahoma for Taylor Tatum, again, it matters. And it looks like the Sooners are dead set. They're heading straight to the finish line in a recruitment that is going to be another big win for DeMarco Murray.
So got plenty to say about Taylor Tatum and some of these upcoming dates. If I can swing back just real quick, a final thought on Williams Nwaneri. You think about Devon Mitchell, who you just got a commitment from, and who did you beat out in terms of that commitment, John? Well, this could be back-to-back recruitments if you start thinking about Tatum, where all of a sudden later in the process you beat USC, and obviously for Taylor Tatum it's Oklahoma and USC for the decision. So that part's pretty sweet, but bigger than that, larger than any hatred or lingering dislike for Lincoln Riley or USC. You beat Miami and you beat Alabama for Devon Mitchell. And for Nwaneri, who are you potentially going to beat? You're potentially going to beat Georgia. So what have we sat here on so many different occasions and said about Oklahoma and their ability to go track down number 8, to be a serious factor, to get that, to go win a national championship, or even, okay, let's go goal by goal, right? To be a serious factor in the SEC, to go win a conference championship there, and then to go track down number 8. Well, probably you're going to have to beat Alabama and Georgia on the recruiting trail. And here in a couple of high-profile recruitments, you've already done it with Devon Mitchell, tight end, big-time position of need, huge recruiting win there for Joe John Finley. And for Nwaneri, for Miguel Chavis, for Brent Venables, for this staff, if you can pull that off, I mean, John, this is – and then you start talking about stacking, right, where you had P.J. Adebawore in the class before it. And who knows who comes who comes with a Williams Nwaneri and a David Stone. I mean, it's starting to feel pretty good for Oklahoma. I know that we kind of along the process, I think, have been confident for Oklahoma, John, but now it feels more likely than ever that each of those two names will be a part of this class for OU. And, oh, by the way, okay, now we swing back into Mr. Taylor Tatum, who is widely regarded as the top running back in this class. John, this thing is, again, turning itself into, for Brent Venables and this staff, massive recruiting wins over some of the USC you wouldn't put in that same category, right, with a Georgia, Alabama. They don't, though they're going to be probably one of the chief challengers out west, you would think, right, going forward. So you just start thinking about some of the recruiting wins potentially for Oklahoma, and probably now seemingly likely in this class for Oklahoma. You're beating Alabama, you're beating Georgia, you're beating USC, legitimate contenders or roadblocks potentially out of the West, and then, definite national championship picture for Georgia and Alabama. And, oh, by the way, what it means for OU in this class nationally in the rankings, and what it means in terms of what you did last year in a recruiting class and what you're going to do this year in a recruiting class. So, man, it is, it's hype season right now on the recruiting trail. We said, wait, baby, wait until June, wait until July. And now it's starting to go that way for Oklahoma.
Yeah. And Jen Kane, you're absolutely right. We don't have them yet, and they're not signed yet, but man, we're all optimism here. I believe that once they commit, you're going to see them signed, and everything is pointing to Taylor Tatum committing. I mean, Josh, you're absolutely right. Like, the wins that Oklahoma is getting, they're big time recruiting wins. To pull a Devon Mitchell out of Southern California, Los Alamitos, where, Lincoln Riley's had some recent success as well with Makai Lemon and Malachi Nelson. There's ties there, and Lincoln Riley went to California hoping to be able to kind of dominate the state, and to get Devon Mitchell, out of that state matters. Now, yes, I know he's got the ties to Michael Hawkins and Allen. That's huge. And then to be able to go and get the number one running back in the class, absolutely huge. And Taylor Tatum, and you're not going to win them all, but you got to win some of them. And you got to win some of them on both sides of the football. For all the good that Lincoln Riley did do, he just didn't win enough of these big time recruiting battles on the defensive side of the ball. They had good players, but there weren't enough difference makers at all three levels of the defense for them to be a serious national title contender. You had great players. Nick Bonito's one of them. Ronnie Perkins, another great one. I'm sure I'm going to blank on somebody, but there were really, really good players individually, but the collective was never good enough defensively. Well, now with Brent Venables, with Jeff Lebby, you're going to be able to pull blue chip talent from both sides of the football. That's going to make you a more complete football team and give you a legit chance to actually contend for a national title down the road. They may not be national title contenders this year, but 25, 26, as these recruiting classes stack up and you start seeing the 2023 guys, the Adepoju Adebare and the Jackson Arnold, those guys start to really set in and take the lead for this team and be the front of this, or the face of this team. That's going to be huge for this team, and it's going to allow them to become actual national title contenders. Whereas, the talent, they have some good individual players. Danny Stutzman's one of them right now. Ethan Downs, a preseason all Big 12 selection. He's one of them. But again, the collective has to continue to improve. But with what Brent Venables and his staff are doing on the recruiting trail, it's going to get there. It's just a matter of how long does it take to get there, and what do the results look like on the field before they get there.
What would just individually, and there's other names in terms of dates coming up. Ragins, somebody asked this question, Hank, is this class really going to have 5 wide receivers? Well, maybe, but let me ask you this before we get to some of the other sort of dates to know. Poe, by the way, July 12th, that sounds like it's going away from Oklahoma. But before we talk about other names that are trending toward Oklahoma and dates that are sneaking up on us, Williams Nwaneri. I know that there's been so much in this class made about David Stone and what his individual eventual commitment and hopefully signature would mean for Oklahoma. It's Williams Nwaneri now, John, that I'm looking at On3's rankings that they just released. Talk about the number 1 overall player in Williams Nwaneri. He looks like a natural, smooth pass rusher. He just avoids blockers. Yeah, I know that sounds so simplistic, but when you watch his tape, it's skillful. It's not even just athletic. It's skillful the way that he avoids blockers. He looks like a number 1 overall player. So it's not, not been a lot of instances where Oklahoma has landed the number one overall player nationally if and when that happens. Adrian Peterson, right? And I mean, that might be it for Oklahoma if Williams Nwaneri stays there. So just individually Nwaneri, the importance of that commitment, that signature, if OU gets it.
It's huge. I mean, it creates a trickle down effect. You know, we talk about a lot of times who are the gravity, changers for a recruiting class. I think Jackson Arnold was very much that for the 2023 cycle. You get Jackson Arnold on board early and it allows the offensive recruiting to really take off. Well, the same could be said for Williams Nwaneri. And I even think a Devon Mitchell. I think having him early or having him reclassify and become part of the 24 class, I think that matters too. But getting Williams Nwaneri in, I do think that kind of changes the gravity a little bit and maybe opens the door for guys like, Dominic McKinley, who the Louisiana native, who most people think is going to be really, really difficult to pull away from LSU. Maybe you can get him now because you're not only loading up with David Stone, but you're loading up with Williams Nwaneri and Nigel Smith and David Stone and maybe a Danny Okoye. Like maybe it just kind of creates this pull for everybody that like, hey, you know what? We see what Georgia's doing with all that defensive talent. Talent begets talent. The more talented players you play with, the better chance you get to shine. And if you're Williams Nwaneri or you want to play with a guy that's as good as Williams Nwaneri, then you're in good shape. Like go to Oklahoma. You want to play with a guy as good as David Stone? You want to go to Oklahoma. And that's what Brent Venables and Todd Bates are creating. Having the number one player in the class, that matters. I mean, everybody's going to see it. It gives you positive buzz and it gives you positive, recruiting buzz. They've really done a good job already defensively with guys like Jeremiah Newcomb and Jaden Hardy, James Nesta. I mean, they've got blue chippers already, but nobody that's going to create the gravity that's going to pull others to them like a David Stone or a Williams Nwaneri. And I really do think both of those guys, they will be big time, gravity changers for Oklahoma Sooners defense, not just on the field, but on the recruiting front as well, because everybody follows these guys. Like everybody is following their recruitments. We're all kind of sitting on pins and needles, just seeing what they're going to say next. And so I think, if Oklahoma is able to pull off Williams Nwaneri and David Stone, man, that's critical. It's key. And it creates so many good vibes and creates a lot of, potential momentum for them as they look to finish out over the next 5-6 months.
Rising tide raises all ships. If that, right. I don't know, or all boats or whatever the phrase may be, right?
Yeah.
Who knows what it is, but you would think that would come into play a little bit, right? I mean, if I'm Williams Nwaneri, if I'm David Stone, if I'm Nigel Smith, if I'm McKinley, heck yeah. I mean, I get the wanting the access to play straight away and snaps, and that's attractive. But, part of what makes Georgia defensive linemen great is they're surrounded by other great Georgia defensive linemen. My job is immensely easier tonight because John Williams is in the booth, right? John's job tonight is immensely easier because Josh Helmer is in the booth, and so on and so forth goes for everybody in this class, everybody that was in the last class up front for Oklahoma defensively, and anybody that would be in this class for Oklahoma defensively, and hopefully beyond. It does feel like Oklahoma has some legitimate momentum here. Fan base, man, has been pining for it. Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis, enough already, and really probably more Todd Bates than Miguel Chavis. It's time to deliver. Well, feels like the delivery is heading Oklahoma's direction here of late, which we thought there was a good chance, but ifs and nuts, candy and butts or whatever, we'll all have a holly jolly Christmas. You got to deliver.
Yeah, and hopefully this Christmas, Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis do deliver. But I do think like you get a guy like Adepoju Adebare who is creating a lot of buzz this spring, and I think that creates more buzz for future recruiting classes. The same will be said for Williams Nwaneri and David Stone, next spring as they're kind of starting to stand out a little bit. It'll create buzz for the 2025 guys as well. So yeah, it's such a good time right now because this is the time where Brent Venables and his recruiting team shine because they want to get these guys, committed, locked up, so to speak, before their senior season start. And really after all those official visits are done, they want to get those commitments and pledges done. Yeah, you guys are worried about my shirt. Well, I'm worried about the skunk that climbed on his face. That is a fly that's buzzing around right now, and I cannot seem to get rid of it. So thanks, Eric Basham, for pointing that out. Yeah, you're talking about the beard. I think the beard. Yeah, that's the 13-day road trip beard. Yeah. So
John, I think it's safe to say, everyone, has returned to Locked On Sooners. Yes, with a chin full of wisdom and a vacation still in full swing. I mean, he has not truly returned to us just yet. He is still on vacation time, but he's delivering the heat tonight. I got to say, he's come in prepared. Maybe the appearance doesn't look like he's returned from vacation, but the delivery has been there. So that's right.
That's right. As I've been co-sleeping with kids the last 2 weeks, I've had some restless evenings. So I've definitely been keeping up to date on what's going on the phone. So it's good times. Zion Ragins, that's another wide receiver we got to talk about. Okay. The next 4-star or 5-star to commit, I think it's Taylor Tatum. Taylor Tatum's going to be your next blue chipper to commit, I think, unless somebody surprises me and decides to commit in the next 11 days to Oklahoma. Maybe it's Casey Poe, but looking unlikely. Otherwise, I think Taylor Tatum. So let's talk Zion Ragins, the wide receiver, the speedster out of Georgia. All things look like they're trending toward Oklahoma. And somebody earlier asked the question, how many wide receivers is Oklahoma going to take? It looks like all of them. They're going to take them all because it doesn't seem like that's going to slow down any potential recruitment for Terry Busey as well. The 5-star athlete that looks like he's trending towards Texas A&M, but don't count Oklahoma out of it. Zion Ragins, man, you can't teach speed, and he's got it in spades. And so if you can add speed to your wide receiver core, you got to. Yes, they've got Zion Kearney. Yes, they've got KJ Daniels. Yes, they've got Dozie Ezukanma. Yes, they've got Ivan Carrion. There's talk that maybe Ivan's going to switch to tight end given his size. But, I mean, you're talking about a 6'6", like 190 dude, 200 dude. You're going to have to add a lot of weight to his frame to make him an inline tight end. So I would prefer they go ahead and just leave him at wide receiver, let him be all Mike Evans for the Oklahoma Sooners. But you can pull 5. You can take 5 wide receivers or 6 wide receivers. Let's just think about this. Who do you feel great about in your wide receiver core right now? I know I do about Jalil Farouk. And you feel good about Jaquaze Petaway in the future. That's it. Like, Drake Stoops will be gone eventually. He's a good player, but he's not a transcendent player. Jalil Farouk could be gone after this year if he has a career year for the Sooners. You haven't seen anything out of Nick Anderson. You know, we love him, or Jaden Gibson. We love him, but we haven't seen anything out of him. Keon Brown, your other 4-star wide receiver commit from the 2023 cycle, he's gone. He's gone to the college, you know, the JUCO route. So you've kind of, and then you're looking at your guys like LV Bunkley Shelton and JJ Hester, you know, Andrell Anthony, Brendan Thompson, these transfer additions over the last couple off seasons that haven't done anything yet. So if you're Emmett Jones, you're like, I want to stack as much talent in this wide receiver room as I possibly can. And however it turns out, if some of these older dudes transfer out, so be it. But that's just kind of the way it works. Like, if you're not going to produce at some point, then you're going to get your job taken. And I mean, Emmett Jones, Brent Venables, they're not sitting back saying, no, we've got this kid in the 2023 cycle we really like, so we're not going to recruit anybody for 2024. No, they're trying to add as much competition to every position group as possible so that everybody is competing and getting better and being challenged, and the best are going to play and the best rise to the top.
Well, and, you know, let's not forget that wide receiver, John, as you think about the aftermath of Lincoln Riley and the staff leaving, I mean, wide receiver is one of the positions that got hit out of the transfer portal for Oklahoma with Mario Williams, with Hazelwood. So, and, you know, you're still trying to kind of recoup a little bit of that depth. And somebody that you mentioned there, the only name that we really confidently, I want to feel good, right, about the potential of Nick Anderson or Jaden Gibson. I want to feel good about some of the bits and pieces we've seen and Oklahoma's willingness to try and go use LV Bunkley Shelton in the Cheez-It Bowl versus Florida State. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a sign maybe for this season, but, you know, other than that, you know, it's projecting maybe some potential with a lot of these guys. JJ Hester, Brennan Thompson, Andrell Anthony had one nice game versus Michigan State eons ago, right? And it wasn't here for Oklahoma. So yeah, I mean, you're projecting with a lot of these names in the wide receiver room. Gavin Freeman, youngster that we've seen do some good things, but certainly not on a consistent basis. So outside of Jalil Farouk, who I think, again, even there, if you wanted to throw it back in our direction and say, okay, well, that's not been a number one wide receiver yet for Oklahoma, would be a fair point. And yet that would be the one name that you really, really feel good about. And then Drake Stoops, right? We feel like we've got proven goods with Drake Stoops, but beyond that, it's a whole bunch of unknowns. And before we see the comment, yes, DJ Graham in the mix at wide receiver. Do not forget DJ Graham when talking wide receivers. But, Jalil Farouk is somebody that, as you think about what it looks like for Oklahoma with this 24 signing class and then beyond, Jalil Farouk's probably not going to be a part of this program, John, next season if things go according to plan for Jalil Farouk. That's somebody that's going to be drafted in this upcoming 2024 NFL draft. So yeah, they need wide receivers. They need as many as they can get because of, again, folks that left at the end of, when Lincoln Riley went to USC, to just the fact that production has kind of been hit or miss so far with a lot of these names, to, Jalil Farouk's probably going to be gone after this year. Yeah, they need wide receivers, and sounds like they're, potentially going to wind up with a bunch of them.
Well, because even if you do have Jalil Farouk for the 2024 season, like all those guys are true freshmen. So, you still have a lot of depth that you have to build up for 2025, 26. Like you're kind of starting over at wide receiver. Theo Wees being gone, like that hurt you. I think maybe no position was hurt more, maybe aside from Caleb Williams leaving, no position was maybe hurt more than wide receiver, because you did lose a lot of depth in Mario Williams and Theo Wees. You lost recruiting kind of cachet a little bit with Mekhi Lemon, no longer a part of the recruiting class. Luther Burden might have ended up, he might've been going to Missouri anyway, but the Lincoln Riley to USC thing definitely changed the picture at wide receiver. So, I mean, you can afford to take as many of these guys as you want. They're all going to be on a little bit different developmental paths too. So, if you have Zion Ragins and KJ Daniels, both guys with a ton of speed, maybe they're not ready to start or be significant contributors at the same time. So whether you take 5 or 6 wide receivers in a class, like it's okay, because again, they're going to be on different developmental timelines that will provide them opportunities to break out. Just like Hank mentions here in the comments too, kind of like the 3 running backs. Yeah, you can afford to take a Taylor Tatum, Xavier Robinson, and a Caden Durham, which again, Durham's one of those players that seems to be trending toward Oklahoma because of different developmental timelines where it's not a linear progression for every single guy. Xavier Robinson might be more physically ready to play than a Taylor Tatum. With Taylor Tatum splitting time between football and baseball, he may not see the field early. That's okay. You've got time because of the depth that you've built up at running back. You've got time for these 2024 running backs to take their time and develop. Whereas with the 2024 wide receivers, you have less time because the depth isn't there, unless you do hit on these transfer wide receivers, Andrell Anthony, Brennan Thompson, DJ Graham breaks out. Like if those things happen, then you feel a little bit better about where wide receiver is heading into the SEC. But still, you need the depth. You got to have the depth at wide receiver, because as we've seen, teams like Alabama was so good because they had so much wide receiver depth. Henry Ruggs and Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, like year after year after year, had dudes that were just blowing by people and just creating these huge plays. LSU is another one. That year that Joe Burrow went off, like who are the names? T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Thank you, Jamar Chase. Just great players. Like you can't. Ohio State's another one. Like they're taking as many good wide receivers as they possibly can and not sitting there saying, "Oh, we can only take 3." No, they're going to take as many wide receivers talented that they want because they're great recruiting schools and developing schools at wide receiver. Oklahoma's trying to become that now.
Yeah, there's no problem with getting a number of talented skill guys, especially when, frankly, you've seen some other skill guys move on. And you make a good point about that LSU bunch. And, ironically, there's, a lot of people that think LSU got pretty good wide receiving core again going into this season, but definitely Ohio State is elite in that regard. There's no harm, no foul in having 5, maybe 6 wide receivers, but definitely 4, 5, 6 wide receivers in a class when you're wide receiver needy, right? I mean, there's no problem in that. So now as we start looking at some of the dates sneaking up on us, John, Casey Poe, July 12th, sounds like Alabama there. Jaden Jackson, I don't know if anybody really has a good feel, but it doesn't sound like Oklahoma there. That'd be July 13th.
Sounds like Texas, which, man, that breaks my heart. That's my favorite player in this class in the whole cycle, and he's going to go to Texas. I hate that.
Well, let's hope that some other folks out there are right, because there's some that still feel like Miami for Jaden Jackson, but we'll see. I mean, yeah, those would be the 2. So then you get through the doesn't sound like it's going to wind up being Oklahoma's. And all of a sudden, by the 1st of August, John, we're talking about this Oklahoma class that right now has 12 commits with Devon Mitchell. We could be talking about 16 commits by that point, because you're talking about Zion Ragins, his commitment date, July 18th. Sounds like Oklahoma. July 21st is Tatum, his commitment date. Sounds like Oklahoma. Michael Patterson McDonald. It's July 31st. Sounds like Oklahoma. And then Nwaneri, right, on August 1st is the commitment date. So sounds like Oklahoma. So by the time we reconvene on this thing, and who knows in between now and then whether David Stone says, you know what, I'm ready to, who knows, maybe Nwaneri. If Nwaneri announces on August 1st, maybe David Stone's like, all right, the fun and games were real fun, and it was a big game, but it's time to just go ahead and announce this Crimson and Cream commitment. Maybe Nwaneri making that decision sort of expedites that process too, and 16 commits turns into 17, and we're talking about a couple of 5-star defensive linemen real quickly by the time we get to right there the beginning of August.
Yeah, and if Kenny Hall over here in the YouTube chat is right, and man, I hope that would be right. If Stone commits, creates a Jaden Jackson flip to Oklahoma, man, that would just make my defensive tackle heart happy. Gotta love the 330-pound, ready-to-play defensive tackles that can also rush the passer. So, I mean, yeah, you're right, Josh. I think by August 1, we're looking at 16 commits in this class, and it could really start to snowball from there, because we really haven't seen the offensive line stuff take off just yet. Eddie Pierre-Louis is one of the guys out of out of the Tampa Catholic area that, I mean, that's a guy that seems to be, buzzing for Oklahoma. And if that happens, man, that's a big time interior offensive line target for the Sooners. They're going to, I can't remember the other guy, the other offensive tackle, maybe, never mind. I'm not going to go there because I can't remember.
Grant Bricks.
Yeah, Grant Bricks. That's another one that we got to keep an eye on. Obviously, Girlfriend Watch is a big part of that one. But if they can land him, that's huge as well. So, I mean, the offensive line stuff will also come together, but there's so much focus on the defensive line for this class, because we know that's going to be the thing that really helps Oklahoma take that step into the SEC and become what we hope is going to be a legitimate year in, year out contender in the SEC, especially on the national title front. You got to have it up front on the defensive line. You got to have it up front on the offensive line, and both places are going to get there. There's just maybe a little bit less buzz right now about the offensive line, but man, defensive line, you got to love where it's heading, because again, you got Nigel Smith, who seems to be tracking toward Oklahoma as well. We don't know a commitment date on that yet. Danny Okoye has had good visits with the Oklahoma Sooners. They've made a really strong impression there as well. There's no telling where it could all end up. Dominic McKinley is not outside of the realm of possibility. Anything's possible. I mean, we know Brent Venables can coach defense. We know Todd Bates can coach defensive tackles. Miguel Chavis is showing that he can recruit defensive ends, and he can even coach them up a little bit too. Ethan Downs, a preseason Big 12 selection, his first year as a starter last year was arguably one of their better defenders. Was it a great season, a transcendent season? No, but he really came on strong toward the end of the year. So you kind of like Miguel Chavis and what he's able to do, just developing players and people and building relationships. So you really, you got to love where all this is trending to. And it's on both sides of the ball, but especially it's on defense, where they really have to make some hay in this recruiting class to set themselves up well for the future.
Well, and some folks said it, I forget who said it at the beginning, but when we're talking hashtag flip season, Oklahoma, how well they perform in 2023, yeah, probably going to help you a little bit. I mean, if we're talking about all these different things happen in a lot of these commitments, and oh, by the way, Oklahoma's back to winning the Big 12 conference in 2023, John. I mean, yeah, some of the flips that could be on the board for Oklahoma too. The only thing I would say about offensive line for Oklahoma, clearly that's the piece of the puzzle that right now doesn't feel like it's gone well across the board outside of Isaiah Autry, right? You'd like to make some hay there. The only thing I can say about that is, from a positive direction to not hit the panic button, is, okay, well, you did just land Walter Rouse out of the transfer portal, right? So that's a name that we'll see how it transpires. Let's see how it plays out with Guyton. You've landed potentially legitimate NFL guys out of the portal if things go according to plan or the way that people feel they can go. I don't know that there's a whole heck of a lot of that happening. Now, there's been a nice little overhaul that we're excited about at defensive tackle and defensive end for Oklahoma out of the transfer portal. I don't know how many top flight NFL guys you're getting out of the transfer portal along the defensive line. Maybe you can do some of that with the offensive line. They need to hit on some of these other big targets, and maybe some of those flips we're talking about. Maybe a Bricks, maybe an Eddie Pierre-Louis, some of these offensive line guys. If all of a sudden all of this comes into fruition the way we're talking about and the season goes great for Oklahoma, maybe these offensive line targets that it doesn't look like are trending Oklahoma's direction, maybe they swing back around to Oklahoma when things are looking really, really good. But the good news there is, if that doesn't happen, Bill Bedenbaugh and Oklahoma, they've shown us they can clean up in that regard in the transfer portal and get pretty solid play up front out of the transfer portal. I don't think you can make a long-term living doing that, but Oklahoma, for at least one cycle, I think maybe can get away with it again.
Well, yeah, they did a good job, landing Wanye Morris out of the cycle and turning him into a draft pick. They did the same thing, McKay McTire, he's been a solid player at guard for him. You're hoping to get the same thing or better out of Walter Rouse at left tackle. So that's, yeah, I think you're right. You can find kind of NFL talent along the offensive line, but you're not necessarily going to find that all the time on the defensive line. Now, you did so in Rondo Bothroyd. I'm still bullish on him. Going to be a top 100 pick in the 2024 NFL draft just based on the production. But yeah, it's just a matter of, you got to find those blue chip players and develop them on the defensive line and the offensive line. But like you said, they've shown the proclivity to be able to pull offensive linemen out of the portal. Bennett Warren was the other offensive lineman that I was thinking of that Oklahoma is trending in a favorable direction for, out of Sugar Land, Texas, offensive tackle, 4-star player in 2024. So, although there hasn't been as much buzz for some of these guys, I think most of that is just because we're so focused on Nwaneri and Stone and Jackson and McKinley and Nigel Smith and Okoye. We're so focused on the defensive line that the offensive line is kind of flying under the radar a little bit, or that the running back Taylor Tatum is creating so much more buzz because of the recruiting battle that it is USC versus Oklahoma, or Devon Mitchell. All these things are creating so much more buzz that offensive line's kind of flying under the radar. And maybe we're just also less worried about it because we know and we trust Bill Bedenbaugh as a developer that he's going to find good offensive linemen. It's just a matter of time. So Kenny Hall saying Warren told Hawkins he's not going to OU. Well, that's a bummer, but I'll have to find that out and see where that's at. But I wouldn't count them out of any recruiting battle on the offensive line just because of Bill Bedenbaugh. So, there's time to make up ground in that recruitment before he commits.
Well, and again, I mean, that's just to our point. Warren is, and that's why, again, everything's going great for Oklahoma. The on-field success will matter, because you don't want this thing to fall apart on itself. I don't think it's going to, though, man. It just feels like there's so much momentum, regardless almost of what happens again this season of Oklahoma. Clearly, it's going to help, right? I mean, you'd rather win double-figure games, and you want to go beat your arch rival in Texas, and you want to go win a Big 12 championship on the way out. I think that just sets the stage for you to work some of these flips potentially for Oklahoma, or lock in definitively these commitments that we feel like Oklahoma is going to earn. But even without that, man, it just feels like there's such a belief, and deservedly so, understandably so, for Brent Venables and for this staff, for Jeff Lebby, for up and down, whether it's Miguel Chavis or Todd Bates. Yeah, I'm buying into what these guys are selling because they've got track records that they can take a program there and get it to the top of college football, whether that's Jeff Lebby as an offensive coordinator has directed some of the nation's top offenses. Not, a good year one, but certainly you wouldn't say top offense nationally in Oklahoma last season, but has done it before, right, at Ole Miss. We don't need to go down Brent Venables' track record. Everybody here is well aware of Brent Venables' track record. Miguel Chavis, a big part of that. Todd Bates has had a track record of finding top-flight defensive tackles and getting them to the league. So kind of, you want to win, and it's important, obviously, and it would put Oklahoma in a better foot-forward situation. But it almost kind of feels like the momentum, John, is they're going to land a great class regardless. And if they go out and play great, then okay, wow, it could be a historic class for Oklahoma.
If they've shown us anything in the year and 6 or 7 months that they've been in Norman, it's that they can recruit. The number 8 class in the 2022 cycle with 2 months on the job. The number 4 class, in the 2023 cycle, less than or a little more than a year on the job, and things seem to be trending toward another top 10 at the floor, probably looking at another top 5 class in this next cycle too. Now it's just a matter of everything starting to be put together on the field, and I think you and I are both pretty optimistic that that's going to happen this year. That 9 wins is not unreasonable. Going to the Big 12 title game is not unreasonable either. And if you can, avoid multiple losses in Big 12 play and you win the Big 12 title, you're going to put yourself in a position to go to the college football playoff. Now, whether they are able to do that, depending on what else the rest of the nation looks like, they're going to have a chance. Now, will they do it? We'll see. Some things got to get better offensively. We've talked about that, but I think defensively, they're going to make such significant strides that they'll put their offense in a better position in games and not have to, be clutch every single time in the fourth quarter like they had to be last year and just weren't. So it's all looking good. It's all looking positive for the Oklahoma Sooners on the recruiting front. And man, I cannot wait to see how the next few weeks transpires, because all of these dominoes are going to start to fall. The splashes are going to be tremendous. We're going to be having, typhoons in Norman, Oklahoma because of the Williams Nwaneri splash and David Stone splash. Like, that's all going to be big, big time. So any other thoughts on the recruiting stuff before we kind of hit on some of the comments or final topic that we had tonight?
Well, I think that segues us right into what we have on the board as well, which is, okay, yeah, this season, obviously, again, how much of an impact is it going to have on the recruiting trail for Oklahoma? I think it's going to be a successful signing class regardless. But again, maybe it could be a historic class if Oklahoma's back to being Oklahoma. So with that at play and that as a backdrop for this season itself, we did get our first peek at we got to look at the Big 12 Media Preseason Bowl. What did you make of Texas up top? 41 first place votes, Kansas State second. I forget how many first place votes they got.
14, I think it was 14.
Okay, that sounds right. And then Oklahoma and Texas Tech. Oklahoma third, Texas Tech fourth, each with 4 first place votes. TCU third, or TCU fifth with 3 first place votes. So just the top 5. What do you make of all of that for OU, for Texas? And can Texas, my question, John, can they handle the hype train? Welcome to a season where you're Oklahoma. Congratulations. Welcome to the party. Can you live up to it?
Yeah, that's basically how I voted in my Big 12 preseason poll, at least in the top 4, as I had Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma. Oklahoma I only had third just as kind of more of a prove it a little bit. I need to see them do better offensively and defensively to really believe they're going to be a Big 12 title contender. I think they're going to be one. I just got to see it on the field. Texas, yeah, they're bringing back one of the better quarterbacks. They're bringing back the best wide receiver core, arguably in the nation, maybe, with Xavier Worthy and Isaiah Neyor and AD Mitchell. No, not AD Mitchell. Anyway.
Adonai.
Yeah, Adonai Mitchell. Thank you. Jatavian Sanders. Like, this is a really good receiving group, and we know that they'll run the ball well. They just usually do. Offensive line is going to be in a good spot. It's a matter of, can they replace the dudes that they had at defensive tackle? Because they lost some really good players up front along their defensive line, a really good player in DeMarvion Overshown. they're going to be really good. Kansas State, I still think Will Howard is an ascending player. He showed that last year. I was shocked at his performance last year based on what we saw from him in 2021. He's a player that's continuing to grow and be on the rise. So I had Oklahoma third, Texas Tech right behind him. I might have had Baylor ahead of TCU just because I'm not a believer in what that's. Sorry, it's not that I'm not a believer in Chandler Morris. I think he's a good enough quarterback to put up yards and points. I just don't know if he's going to be as clutch as Max Duggan was this year. And then, yeah, Oklahoma State, that one first place vote is kind of shocking. I gotta say it was a Oklahoma State beat writer or just somebody trolling Cowboys fans a little bit, because I don't get how you put, give Oklahoma State a first place vote at all in this one, but that looks about right to me. And as far as Texas goes, man, this is the biggest we'll see season for them. Like, if they're ever going to achieve anything under Steve Sarkisian, like, everything is laid out perfectly for them to do it this year. And if they don't, it's going to be a huge disappointment. And I mean, even if they get to the Big 12 title game and lose, I think a lot of people might still be pretty pissed at Sark for not winning the Big 12 title. You had a great opportunity last year in Oklahoma's worst season since 1998, and you couldn't even make the title game. And you gave Oklahoma an opportunity to reload. And if you can't win it again this year before going to the SEC, it's going to be tough sledding once you get there. And Texas, if they're not able to win the Big 12 title, one, everybody's going to have a lot of fun at their expense. And two, it'll be a wasted opportunity, because the league is so questionable from 2 to 14 that they should run away with it. Like, they might lose to Alabama, but there's no reason for them to not go through the Big 12 slate undefeated. If they lose a game like to Texas Tech, that'll be a big upset. If they lose to Baylor, huge upset. Houston, something like that transpires. Like, that would be so big, and it might put Sark so, like, his seat might be so hot at that point that no matter what happens the rest of the season, he might not get off it. But I mean, everything's laid out for him. Yeah, they have a tougher schedule than Oklahoma, but they're a better team than Oklahoma on paper, at least. Now it comes down to, can they do it? I don't know. I had this thought the other night when I was kind of laying in bed wide awake with, one kid on my side and the other kid snoring in the other bed in the hotel, just wondering, like, okay, Texas beat Oklahoma 49-0. Going into this game, are they going to overlook the Sooners a little bit? Because a lot of those guys are back. And they're like, oh, we got Oklahoma 49-0 last time. We got this. It's not going to be no problem. Don't do that. I know you're not listening, but that would be a mistake to overlook Oklahoma, because they're a different team this year. They're going to be a much, much better team this year. Dylan Gabriel is going to be available for the game this year. And if he's not, you got a much better backup in Jackson Arnold that is going to be able to put some points on you if you're not careful. But I think that's going to be a potential trap game for the Longhorns, just based on what happened last year and that being in everybody's memory.
And I say just the opposite. I say absolutely take Oklahoma for granted and sleepwalk into that game. And it's Texas. You know what? You are tremendous. Oh my gosh, what a terrific close loss again at Alabama. You are clearly the Big 12 favorite. There's no reason for you to respect Oklahoma at the Cotton Bowl. Mm-hmm. And the eyes of Texas have been blackened again, baby. Good night, Quinn Ewers. So come on down here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Come on into the Cotton Bowl feeling really confident and good about yourselves, and then Oklahoma will remind you who Oklahoma has been in this conference and how this rivalry versus Oklahoma has gone when, I don't know, Oklahoma has its starting quarterback for the game. So, yeah, come on in a little cocky, a little arrogant. That'd be just fine by me. But you're right. It's going to be interesting to see how the expectations goes for Texas. And, expectations are a funny thing. You love Steve Sarkisian. You love the momentum for Texas going into this thing. You feel really good about Quinn Ewers and his development, and you feel good about what's coming down the pipeline with Arch Manning and on and on and on, until Oklahoma reminds you that Oklahoma's typically won that game of late in the Cotton Bowl. And, oh, by the way, Oklahoma goes and wins the Big 12 championship, and Texas flops like Texas has typically flopped in the last 15 years since they went and played for a national championship. So if all of those things happen for Texas, it would take a perfect storm of mediocre. but I'm not putting it out of the realm of possibility that Texas is looking for a new head football coach if all of those things happen this season for UT. Don't know that that's going to happen for Texas. Obviously, they're talented. There's a reason that, I can say what I just said a second ago and poke fun at Texas, but there's a reason that they've got 5 guys on the Big 12 preseason team. It's a talented football team when you look at the skill position, and obviously there's an offensive lineman that they like and the defensive player of the year that folks like in Jalen Ford. But again, having a couple of talented pieces and then having a head coach in Sarkisian, putting all those pieces in place to go be best positioned to week after week, be consistent and successful, that's a different thing. Texas has had talent. They just don't put it together, John. So we're going to see if they can put it all together, if Quinn Ewers can take another step, and if they can legitimately live up to expectations. Because, you tell me, 2009, I guess, would be the last season that Texas, lived up to expectations. They haven't done it in 15 years.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And this is a team that, as Jimmy Cutter says here on YouTube, UT is always better than OU on paper. And if you talk to them, they're always better than any NFL team. It's true. You look at the recruiting classes, they generally recruit better than Oklahoma. Talent wise, the talent is always better than Oklahoma's. But what's been the difference is coaching. Bob Stoops, and listen, we can trash Lincoln Riley. He coached Oklahoma to some big wins over Texas when he couldn't recruit defense. They had big offensive wins. So this is a team that, is gonna again, it's gonna be a different team that Oklahoma's rolling out there with a better quarterback situation, with a much better defense. Reggie Pearson, Rondo Bothroyd, Dasan McCullough, and improving Justin Harrington, an improving cornerback group. I think it's going to be a much more physical team. We saw signs of it in the spring game last year, in the spring game a year ago. We saw signs of it in the non-conference, but it didn't really play out. I think the totality of this team is going to be much more physical and play with a much different edge than what we saw a year ago. They're not going to be playing hesitant. They're not going to be getting bullied around as much. They're going to be the bullies. We're going to see this team take on the role of the bully defensively. And that's going to be a big difference than what Texas saw a year ago in the Cotton Bowl. When they rolled into the Cotton Bowl, I just don't know if Oklahoma really had much belief in themselves last year. Now those guys might tell you different, but defensively it started off strong, but then once the floodgates opened, they couldn't really do anything. Offensively, they had nothing. They just really had nothing that whole game. And I don't know. And we talked about it this time last year that it just wasn't a great setup for anybody to have success. I don't know if the coaches put them in the best mindset for them to have success. I think that's going to be very, very different this time around.
Let's hope so, right? Because it just feels, because Oklahoma lost it, and in the fashion that Oklahoma lost it, where it was demoralizing, and oh, by the way, there's these expectations for Texas, and on and on and on, all of the pieces of the puzzle that connect together. It feels like a larger, or as large of an OU Texas game as we've seen in some time for Oklahoma. Again, the paramount in the importance of that game, how paramount it is, it's always big. But this one, because of the fashion that you lost last year, is even, kind of ratcheted up another notch. Because the SEC, all right, we see you guys. We'll be moving in next door here in just a little bit, all right? I'm on the phone with the movers as we speak. Because of all of that, it's a huge Oklahoma-Texas game.
And there's going to be a lot to come out of Big 12 Media Days this week that we'll touch on. We'll hear what Brent Venables has to say, what some of the players have to say. We'll keep you going all week long here on Locked On Sooners. We'll have coverage for you on the recruiting front if commitments happen. We'll do that here. So make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. We're free and available on all platforms. Again, free and available. If you like what we do here, the best way for you to support us, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, go to Apple, go to Google, go to Spotify, write a review, give us a 5-star rating. That's the best way to support our show here on Locked On Sooners. And we appreciate everybody that joins the chat every Monday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. It always is a lot of fun for us to watch what's going on in the chat while we're discussing some things. You guys have a great time. And we appreciate the way that you all have a great time in that chat. It's just good discussion. Nobody's getting onto each other about stuff. It's fantastic to watch. And he gives us great talking points to touch on as well. So it's a lot of fun every Monday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you're here for it. Make sure you follow Josh on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. Again, follow the show, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, he's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. We'll talk to you then. And we say, Boomer Sooner.